don't think so because like these club games have no absolutely zero historical context or context at all. You couldn't tell me who the winner's circle team beat in their second game of the club season.
Right.
You know, you couldn't tell me what the team chosen one elite from Pasadena, who they even played in game 3 of their season out in Arizona. So there's no context. And the game would really, really suck if they did that. Now, there are people in education who believe, Tommy, like what you're talking about is eventually going to come because they believe that admin types don't like sports at all. It's just an afterthought. It's a pain in their ass. And what they really care about is attendance and grades and test scores and not sports. So there are people that think that, and that would be a way for, club to jump in. But,
I hope everybody's hearing that, Aram, because I believe that there's a possibility that it's gonna go away in some places.
There's a lot of club guys that believe that too.
Hey, let's go.
All right, today on the podcast we have Aram Tolegian. He's the big voice in the Southern section on Twitter. He is the gatekeeper. He's the one keeping everybody honest. There's a great conversation with him. It's actually 2 parts. So let's give a big out loud welcome to Aram Tolegian on the podcast today. Thanks.
People don't want to hear shit, and and the high school scene's a funny scene. And again, I come at it from a coach's point of view, but it's we laugh all the time because we say we go to coaches clinics that are fucking great. You don't get a ton of information because guys are only giving up so much and stuff, but 80 to 90% of those guys are fucking ego wackos. I mean, it's all about their own interests, and it's really hard. And I'm sure I'm going to piss a bunch of people off too, but it's hard to buy into all their bullshit, and yep. That ego stuff. I got into it a little bit with a guy that was a coach who was doing a lot of bad mouth and the COVID thing and not being able to go to his restaurant, and a Huntington Beach guy of all things, which obviously that says a little bit, but
naturally,
I said, if you had a player who came to you and said, hey coach, I dig what you're doing here, but that spring football shit, I'm not really down for that. I got other things I want to do. And I mean, we're all about sacrifice and do what's best for the team and all that. And you're bitching and complaining about not being able to go to a restaurant because you got to wear a mask. It's really a tough thing to stomach for guys that are supposed to be leading, and leaders for the.
Look, this whole pandemic has brought out some sad truths about a lot of people, and it shed some light on a lot of things. There's, in my opinion, there's a right side and a wrong side. There's the truth, and then there's everything else. And so long as you stick by the truth and do the right thing, and this is something that I've tried to share with sports writers right now, you just sit tight and be right. And what I mean by that is kind of what you talked about. Spring ball, is a good place to start. We're still in the midst of a pandemic. Granted, things are getting better, and that's great. And there are signs of life. But if you go back to just January, which is just a few months ago, Twitter and social media, Twitter is mostly where I am, is loaded with high school football coaches that were really, really, really pressing for the season to start. If you'll recall, the original one was canceled or postponed, and the plan was to move it to January. Right. And when it didn't look like January was going to happen because there was this monstrous surge going on, you saw this major revolt. And I just can't get my head around why people would want to be having a season or really, more than that, putting others at risk with this type of behavior. I couldn't understand it. And since then, my conclusions are just a couple of things. It's driven by parents who feel that their kids, may not get a season. and they are hell bent on getting them that, very selfishly, in my opinion. It's terrible that a kid might miss a season. It's terrible to have sports taken away from you. I totally get that. But there is a bigger picture out there, and we are trying to mitigate that. And to be taking this counter action just because your kid may not get a season just didn't sit right with me. And then you had coaches on top of it pushing for that. These are guys that should be considering safety first. Okay. There's always going to be another season. I get that. But for a senior, there might not be. And I understand that that's a factor. But this is a once in a lifetime event, and the dangers far outweighed the rewards for this, and it brought out the worst behavior, in my opinion, because what you eventually got was a rebel faction combined with people who were willing to take advantage of the situation, and they combined together. The rebel faction was, I don't give a shit that there's a pandemic going on, that there's 3,000 people in the country dying per day. I want my kid to get a season. That's the parents. The people ready to take advantage, the 7-on coach that all of a sudden became a club coach. These are guys, for the most part, that are glorified camp counselors that are now head coaches of club football teams. They're making a ton of money off of it. Because the parents are so desperate to have this season that absolutely nobody cares about. They stepped in, saw opportunity. And then you had high school coaches that when things looked darkest, they didn't stick to their guns, a lot of them. They joined the club thing too. They said, if there's going to be a club thing, and I don't know if CIF's ever going to give us a season this school year, well, then I will jump to the club thing. And when they did that, they completely ceded power to the club football coach, to the 7-on coach. Right on. And it was just astonishing to me to see that happen, and very disappointing.
It's been a trend, and it's been happening for a while, that it's been evolving, through the 7-on-7 stuff. And we've watched it happen. I railed against it. And I ran a lot of those camps. At Pioneer when I was there, and we had 300 to 400 and 500 kids out there dropping $300 in cash on a table, and I just watched it like, holy smokes. And obviously we benefited a little bit because our kids got to go for free, and we got to have something cool, a big time deal that they got to experience. But other than that, it was unbelievable that those kids, kids were coming from all over, the inner city kids and all that kind of stuff. And and then you watch them go out and practice, and they're not getting coached. It's a cattle call. It's not you're not getting coached. And the guys that aren't the dudes, real quickly are at the back of the line and not getting any reps. And, and there's no coaching going on.
Not only are you at the back of the line, you're paying.
Yeah.
You're actually a paying customer, because the guys that are good are on the team for free.
Right.
And that's to, make the team better, or to lure, other guys out there. So it's funny how the guys that, were less talented, they had to pay, or their parents did.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the combine stuff. I'm sorry, Tom. No. It's like the combine stuff. We watched the combine stuff, and our kids would go, Coach, I gotta go. And I said, Johnny, I don't want to be brutal, but you're not Nike combine guy. You need to start thinking about the Division III schools and start and get your grades where they need to be. And that's how you're going to get to go someplace. But no, Coach, I got to go. My dad, my mom, they want me to go. It's a big thing. It turned into a really sad situation for kids, because I stopped lying to them and started telling them the truth. And, it helps some kids get to Division III schools. Well, yeah, that's another whole story we can talk about down the road here about, my approach to, a $19 million stadium and a guy who refused to be a major recruiter. And, that's why we didn't have success. And I have no misconceptions about that. My history in coaching is, I'm settled with it all. I took that job on some circumstances that made sense to me. And I think those kids, people ask me all the time, shit, dude, why don't you, enough is enough. Why don't you go back to St. Paul, or why don't you go to Mater Dei or Bosco? Those guys are all over you. They want, those guys talk to you, and, you're friends with those guys. And I said, these kids need me more than anybody, and we gave them a Division I type of experience that they never would have had. But we weren't getting complaints from parents because there weren't a lot of parents involved. And the 10 that were, shit, they did everything, and we had it again. Those kids got to experience that, but I didn't coach in 8 seasons there. I didn't coach one D1 type kid. So it's one of those things where you have to be okay with that, because again, I raised the expectations in that place, and right away everybody went, oh, this is great, this is cool, this is neat. Well, then everybody went, well, why aren't we freaking better, and why aren't we winning more, and all that kind of stuff. And again, I won't make any excuses for my coaching ability, but it's a really different thing to try and sell kids on those things that these 7-on-7 and these club teams are selling, and then to watch the big boys sell out, right away, man. It was like, holy shit. Well, we're gonna have a team at Bosco, and we're gonna have a team at Mater Dei, and we're gonna have a team at St. Paul, and and I'm like, yeah, you're not putting up a fight, and guys were just afraid of losing kids. So
do you think, Aram, that the Division I kids aren't being seen? You don't think that Alabama knows who they're going after? Like that's always my slant on the deal. Like, why are these kids chasing these kind of things, this exposure? I mean, some of the exposure that I saw in the club thing probably wasn't exposure that you wanted to have. I thought it was pretty sloppy. I've coached for 30 years as well, and I thought it was pretty damn sloppy. I didn't think that tape did him any good. Did you find that to be very strange too? Like this whole lie perpetuating this whole messing with these kids' head?
No, because I know that these are grifters, and I know that these are con men that are running these things.
Right.
And they are selling dreams, and they're selling dreams to desperate people. Isn't that what they say the mafia does? They are for people that want something but can't have it, and they kind of turn to them for it. And that's the kind of thing that happens here. The parents are sold. If your kid is halfway decent, they're sold a lie probably starting in junior high school about them potentially being D1. And that lie is perpetuated so that the club coach, or, which was previously the 7-on coach or the private training coach, can make money. What are they going to do? Say, I'm sorry, Mrs. Smith, but Jimmy really isn't D1 material. Well, she's going to go home and he's not going to get paid. So they're going to keep kind of perpetuating that lie. And that's what got pushed out here. And you're totally right, Tommy. The level of play sucked. Not only that, the conduct sucked. You've seen, some of these horrible images that come out of 7-on-7 passing things with the, the showboating and the grandstanding and just horrible stuff with the coaches even involved. That was the same thing here. All you had to do was look at those ones that were played in Bullhead, Arizona. Yeah. I mean, it was a nightmare. I mean, you could hear the announcer and parents cussing each other out and stuff like that. I mean, it was unbelievable. And, it was desperate people taking care of, excuse me, con men taking care of desperate people. And that there's not, and Coach Will, you can talk about this. I mean, when did we get to a point that we started believing, like Tommy said, that Alabama wouldn't notice top talent? When did we get to that point? Because as I understand, like when I was in the high school in the early 90s, people saw, guys got recruited, guys, the best guys went to the best places. There wasn't some major problem with talent falling through the cracks.
Right.
Now there seems to be this big, lie that's being sold that a lot of talent falls through the cracks, and you need me, your 7-on coach, to make sure that you can get out there. This wasn't broken. It was just opportunistic for people to jump in and feed this thing. And Coach Will, you talk about programs selling out. That's all Bosco and Mater Dei have been doing for the last 10, 15 years. They've gotten into this rat race with the rest of the Trinity League trying to chase them, willing to go to any extent So why would we be any surprised or be surprised at all that they would sell out to the club ball thing too?
Yeah.
I mean, this is just some of the stuff that has just sickened me about high school football, because I love football, all three levels, but this was the last pure form of the sport. And that is by and large being like completely diminished now. And it's very, very sad to see, because it's not pure so many places now.
Well, my experience, Aram, was my mom was a single parent. I could play a little football. I got an opportunity to go to St. Paul High School. Not only was it great football in the late 80s, but it was a situation where there were people that were surrounding me that I did not have in the neighborhood of Norwalk, and where I could lean on my coach. Chuck Willig was my coach senior year, and I could lean on him for him to be my true north, if you know what I'm saying. And we're talking, I don't mean to circle back to the coaching thing, but for God's sakes, high school coaches aren't paying their mortgage with their stipend. They're paying their mortgage with their teaching job. Right. So they have no reason to compromise their values. They should be the beacon in the storm. They should be the lighthouse in the harbor. For me, I was lucky enough to go to a place where that was in place. And if it wasn't Chuck kicking my ass, it was the principal or my math teacher. That was a different situation. But I wouldn't have been a successful adult without that. And all the lessons we learned on the field and all the lessons we were held accountable for off the field came from my team and my coaching staff. And for those guys to say, yeah, we got to go play that rat race, we got to go do these things, I don't understand the motivation. There's just as many people that are going to say, we're going to learn. I'm hoping, Aram, that people learn from this. I hope they listen to you and they say, you know what? This is all bullshit. And this is I love the grifter concept. These are grifters. And I need to put my son in front of somebody that's not a grifter. And I need to put my son in front of somebody that's going to teach him how to be a man, not be a sellout, whatever you want to call it. And I hope there's something good that comes from this. And I love the way you beat the drum. I mean, I felt like I listened to a bunch of your podcasts and you're beating the drum, and my hat's off to you and my respect is to you, because I think this is shining a light on some stuff that is completely opposite of why we even have sports. So I just want to thank you before we get any farther on that.
Yeah, well, thanks, Tommy. I know others feel the same, so I'm not the only one that feels that way.
They do. There's a good, I coached. I was the offensive coordinator at St. John Bosco with Jerry Person back in the mid '90s, and what a cool experience it was, because I was that St. Paul guy. We need a St. Paul guy to come in here and right. Get just a little more,
toughen it up
again, fill in the blank, whatever that was. And so I really loved his giving me the opportunity to be me. And I think, we had some success, but there was talent at St. John Bosco that those guys, my first thought, and I told friends this, they should win a CI championship every 3 years. Yeah. They had that kind of talent, not knowing, obviously, looking what it would eventually. And then I came back and coached Patrick Cowan's. I was the quarterback coach for Pat Cowan, and Joe Cowan is my godson. And I came back in 2003 and coached Patrick 1 year. And, that was the kind of the end of Kiki's reign. And they still had kids, but it had thinned a little bit, but the difference was when Jason took over, whoever was in charge of the move, they opened up the freaking purse strings and they started giving money to everybody known mankind. And all of a sudden they got 3 guys on campus that are recruiting. Now, I don't know what they called them, but it seemed like, they went all in on that stuff, and it obviously it's turned into this unbelievable thing that they've developed over there. And the Panish Stadium and those guys putting that thing together, and the money coming through there is tremendous. It's amazing. But there's guys that are losing their dreams because they're just standing on the sideline and they're 3rd string and 4th string and they ain't gonna get a chance. And they're talking about on the TV that their 3rd string guys haven't played it down and they've got 3 offers. Well, that's kind of strange too. What do you think about those programs at this point?
I think that Mater Dei and Bosco are both all that's wrong with high school football, especially specific to Southern California. You mentioned Bosco and how they're getting it done. I showed on social media a couple of years ago, and I think I talked about it on my podcast. They have an assistant coach, Terry Bullock, who Chris Steele, he's now at USC, a defensive back. His father posted on Facebook, and I'm loosely quoting here, but it's about right. I have the post. It's since been deleted and the page made private. But anyways, I have the post. He's saying that if it wasn't, this was like Chris's senior year, something to the effect of, if it wasn't for Terry Bullock talking to me on the sideline of a youth football game when we were headed to Sarah and Gardena, when we were originally headed to Sarah, and change my mind and get me to go to St. John Bosco, none of this would have happened. And I think about that conversation all the time. And, what a great moment in life. And, thank God, he recruited us out of here to change our mind from going from one place when the kid was in junior high to another. And this guy, Bullock, is on the timelines of so many eighth graders. It's unbelievable. You'd think he's 13 years old himself. It's a joke. It's ridiculous. I turned that over to CIF, and you know what happened? From what I can tell, basically Glenn Martinez, the late Glenn Martinez, called Bosco, told them, hey, people are kind of on your trail here. They got the dad to delete the post, and nothing ever came out of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we move to Mater Dei. Mater Dei, a couple seasons ago, rented 2 players from Rancho Cucamonga. Okay, these guys were going to be seniors at Rancho Cucamonga. They played their senior seasons at Mater Dei. Mater Dei basically rented them. I mean, they were quasi starters. They weren't 100% starters. One was a running back that got some carries. Mater Dei, after the bad publicity, after these kids, after the season left Mater Dei, went back to Rancho, something I extensively, I think, tweeted about at the time. I don't think, I did a podcast on it, how bad it looked. They just went back, and it was like rent a player or rent players for a season. They come out and say, well, we are going to change our admissions guidelines. We're no longer going to accept, guys, upperclassmen transfers and stuff like that. We are going to make sure, these are like Mater Dei kids all the way. So what happened this offseason? Bryce Young goes to Alabama, and Miller Moss, one of the top QBs in SoCal, decides that he's going to transfer out of Alemany and go to Mater Dei for his senior season. They accepted him. When they said that they were going to stop that sort of business practice, they accepted him. They also shuttle kids in. This is well known. Shuttle kids in from the IE. They have a shuttle that shuttles them in. When I was coming up, Mater Dei was the Orange County All-Star team, and it was bad enough as is that they would, pick and choose and do the things they needed to do to get just the best of OC. Now it's extended to all over Southern California. And again, why? I know that St. John Bosco was starting to get away from them. And so maybe Rollo panicked or the powers that be panicked. But these schools have, it's so obvious the things that they're doing. One of them recruits kids, straight out of junior high through, that's Bosco through Bullock and other things. The other one gets transfers and rents players and shuttles them in from the Inland Empire. Is that high school football? Is that pure high school football? Or is that people that are just trying to win at all costs? And I don't get it either. I think one of you guys mentioned it. I think, Tommy, it was you. Are these coaches getting paid for wins? What's in it for them? Yeah, I get it. Rollo makes money, and I'm sure Negro makes good money too. But, a lot of the other guys don't. They make a stipend, and yet they're still and would do the same things that these programs do if it meant wins. And I just don't understand it. They would be willing to play through a pandemic. They would be willing to, recruit kids out of junior high illegally at youth football things. You're not allowed to do that. They would, you name it, they would do it. I just don't know where people's morals have gone. So, and I'm sick of seeing, honestly, sports writers, the guys that are covering this stuff now, bitch about this all off season and talk about following the rules. And then the first fucking game of the season, guess who they're covering?
Oh,
It
yeah.
happened just Saturday night. Guess
Right.
who they're covering?
Yep.
St. John Bosco.
Of course.
You know, so I told Eric Sonheimer of the LA Times on Twitter when he complained about, and he wasn't naming names, but it was obvious he was complaining about Bosco Mater Dei. I told him, okay, stop covering them. Same thing with CIF. That little show that they started this season, they do like, a video show. The first place they profiled was St. John Bosco. I get it. It's their meal ticket. They have profit sharing off the TV. I hadn't realized that until this past offseason that CIF makes money off of those things. And who do you think brings in the most money?
Yeah.
Mater Dei and Bosco.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I laughed.
CIF is money starved.
But yeah, well, and you had made mention, the MAGA crew and things like that, and it's worldwide. It's kind of a movement across all kind of genres. I mean, it's that money grab. It's that we've lost our sense of care and kindness and thoughtfulness and intelligence for the money grab and for who cares how the government's run as long as my 401k is kicking ass. We've talked about that before. And I think it's gone down. I'm surprised, and I know you're probably got some comments on this, but I look back to the CIF's response to a lot of things, and I'll never forget being at Long Beach, Jordan, and having a kid that was playing for Lakewood that would go and walk down to 7th Street by Long Beach Wilson, sit at the bus stop, get on the bus over to Lakewood, and play at Lakewood. And everybody knew it, and there was no question about it. And I'm not sure who in our group, whether it was our coach or our administration, but they called them on it. And they went to the CIF, and they said, well, you have no proof. So somebody filmed the kid sitting on the bus stop outside. And there was nothing that they would ever do about it. And we got to the point where I realized as a coach years later that unless your principal turns you in, there's really nobody that can get you busted, right, for that kind of stuff, for transgressions. That's a great point. Which again, to allow yourself to be this, the CIF is probably, one of the most well-known organizations in high school sports. And for them to allow that to happen, does that make them part of the money grab as well? Is that all there was?
Absolutely.
Yes, it does. 100%. And they are money starved because, as you know, attendance is dropping. Attendance for playoffs is dropping. They're not making as much money, and they need other ways to make it up. And that would be TV. Who does the casual high school football fan in SoCal want to see play on Fox Sports West 2 or whatever they call it now? Who do they want to see? Do they want to see San Gabriel High School, or do they want to see St. John Bosco? And so therefore it's just best for CIF, I guess, to just, let them go with it. But you brought up the MAGA coach thing, and that's a term that, I'm going to take. I didn't copyright it. I should, though, because I don't know what the shelf life is on it anymore. But nonetheless, that's something that I coined. And that is a separate issue, and I think it's one worth talking about. It's separate but same. The MAGA coaches, were the guys that were lobbying for we need to play a season at the height of the pandemic a few months ago. That was them. Despite, whatever, common sense telling you that would just be a very bad thing to have happen.
Right.
They're also the guys that, because of their political beliefs, and this is something that I did a podcast about, was that previously your political beliefs weren't dangerous, okay? You could believe what you want, I could believe what I want. It wasn't dangerous to our bottom line. It wasn't dangerous to high school football. They were just your political beliefs. But when you start talking about your political beliefs cloud how you view a deadly pandemic, how you view a deadly virus. If you are the guy, and a lot of these MAGA coaches were, that were downplaying the virus, saying it was just a flu. I had the coach at Azusa High School tell me on Twitter that it's called COVID-19 because there were 18 before it, and he's being serious. He's being serious.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of guy, of course, is not going to be taking the virus serious, and it needs to be taken serious. Now I got a question if you're a safety risk, because if you're not taking the gun that's pointed to all of our heads serious, how can I trust you to keep my kids safe? And it's a problem as we speak, because schools, some of them aren't testing. And they're talking about how rates need to get below a certain level so that these schools don't have to test. And I'm sitting here saying, why do they want to get out of testing? Why would they want to get out of testing? Wouldn't you want it to be the most safe environment that there was? And testing is the best way to tell that.
Absolutely.
The coaches, a lot of them don't want to test because they're scared of what they might find. You know, you're going to need, you know, you have a 5-game season to be played in what, 6-7 weeks? You take 2 weeks off or 3 weeks off, you know, your season may be cut in half.
It's funny about the whole thing is the funny thing about the whole thing is if they were to do a 0 period testing every week, get up in the morning on Monday, get your ass over there, get tested, you're going to be able to isolate that child who is sick potentially, because if you do it in the afternoon, they've been hanging out, they've been in the locker room, they've been, you know, sharing whatever. Now your whole program has to stop. See, I think that's the fascinating thing. You want the whole program to end with one positive test, or do you want to be able to isolate? And maybe that's not, maybe I'm pushing it too far as well, but I just feel like it's backwards freaking idea. You know, just, we want to test as much as possible. You know, even with the president, if he would have been behind testing, he could have banged the drum about it being a low death rate. Instead, everybody that was getting tested was dying. And it made it look freaking scary. You know, it's very scary, by the way. I'm a cancer survivor and it's fucking scary. And I've been in the house for 12 months, but you know, I really don't understand the playbook on this. Why are they, let's be as, you know, clear as possible. Let's be as transparent as possible. Let's get all these kids. We're going to put due diligence into this. There's going to be no liability. I mean, for goodness sakes,
the answer to that. The answer to that is, you know, because they view COVID as not a deadly virus, but just a weapon that the media used to take down their president. That's how they view it. And
in the most selfish ways, you know?
Right? Partially true, but it is a deadly virus. There is no denying that. Yep. Everyone now seems to know somebody who passed away from it, right. And you know, just this past week, you know, we had the La Habra Mission Viejo game, which was one of the biggest in Southern California, get canceled because Mission Viejo, go figure, a school deep in the heart of Orange County, had positive COVID tests. Their coach, Mad Chad Johnson, the midnight tweeter, as I like to call him, he's the guy that was tweeting a couple of years ago about how he was going to rat out Bosco and people you think are your friends aren't and stuff like that. Oh, and I've invited him on the podcast. Hey, come on and tell me what you meant by that. Let everyone know. And what was his answer? No response. And he deleted the tweets, but I have those saved as well. This is the same guy that when they found out about the positive tests last week, he is not wanting to cancel the game. He's in complete denial of it. And he's saying, we need to retest. Let's retest. I don't believe the results of the test. You know, we don't need to do, or we can do contact tracing and take the kids out that need to be taken out. And basically everyone just kind of moved on, but him, and La Habra rescheduled and played Chaminade instead. That's what I'm talking about. How do you trust guys that are coming from a place due to politics that they don't take a deadly virus serious? It's very, very dangerous. And our political differences were never this dangerous. And they are now.
True. Yeah, we have a school.
Pros.
I have a friend that he'll remain nameless because he told me on the down low. But their school offered, they don't have to test, but their school offered all the football team free tests. You know, if you want to test, we'll test you Friday at 3:00. And nobody. You know, on a school with 100, maybe somewhere around 100 varsity players, nobody showed up. So
Wow.
that doesn't come from nowhere. You know, you don't think that there was.
But you don't want to be that kid, Chuck, do you? You don't want to be that kid that ruined the whole season for.
Well, I guarantee you, that's the words that are being spoken. Can you imagine a kid going, well, I want to test. Well, shit. Can you imagine that the parents that find out that the kid never told them that this testing was going on, or hid the email or whatever went down that the parents didn't know? There's some parents that are going to be furious. I think, there's too many kids on that team to say that nobody's going to care. But I guarantee you, can you imagine if the coach said that to you and you going, oh, well, I know I don't want to be the guy, and then hearing stories about some other schools who, the kid that's the center at Santa Fe who tested positive. He was the reason, and everybody knew he was the reason that they had to cancel their game with Lucerna. And that puts a kid into a professional type of a situation.
What's weird, Chuck, is at my school we have letters every week saying there's somebody on the campus that's but it's completely anonymous. There's someone on campus, and if you were in contact with them, we would have already talked to you. So don't worry. And this happens time and time again every single week. But how do they throwing that kid under the bus, that center under the bus, or the kid, whoever that single kid is, you would think that would be way worse than some teacher. At least if I'm a grown ass man, I'd be like, hey man, I'm really sorry. I hope I didn't offend anybody or infect anybody, but a kid has no chance. He's going to get tortured. Well, that seems like it should be the highest level of security of all time.
Guys, I just want to say, I name names. I've mentioned Bullock, Rolo, Mad Chad Johnson. I don't know, maybe a couple, Chris Steele, whoever. And I name names, and people may say, well, it's easy for you to get on there and say that. And just so everybody knows, if any of those names or anybody close to them want to discuss me naming their names, you can come on my podcast. You can go on social media. You can go on Twitter. I will present the evidence that I have. Okay, I'm not just talking out of my ass. You're not going to take me up on it because I'm speaking the truth. I am telling you the God's honest truth about these things, or else I wouldn't name the names. And a lot of people in sports writers now, and I get it, they have a job to do, they have relationships to keep, are not going to name names. But if anybody thinks I'm bullshitting about these things, especially those people themselves, I've offered all of them. Come on my podcast. You'll be given, a beautiful chance to say what you want to say, or go on Twitter or Facebook, preferably Twitter, and say what you want to say. And I will present the evidence of, I don't even want to call them accusations because they're facts. That I'm presenting. So please, nobody, I don't want anyone, thinking that I'm talking out of my ass or diminishing your podcast by just making speculative accusations, because they're not.
Well, and I can attest to that. I know I've been listening to your stuff for a long time, and I, like I told you before you came on, the honesty is the deal maker here for us, and that's why we want to join, because that's the hardest thing for the people that are still connected to schools, the key people that are still have their jobs there, and it's again, I feel kind of like a punk, a little bit by not naming names, but again, if it was firsthand, I would definitely, because I don't believe that they're doing the right things. I know Rob Wygod a little bit, and I known him for a little bit of time, and we're not great friends and we don't hang out or anything like that. But I coached with, the Scott Myers and those guys who were friends with him, even the Bosco, Monty McDermott and those guys, and and that kind of stuff. But what do you think? Do you think Rob has any nightmares about this stuff?
Oh yeah, for sure. Are you talking about, the conduct of the top few teams, or are you talking about like pandemic stuff?
Well, I'm saying because they didn't respond to like kind of opening things up until the court case I believe in San Diego. Am I correct on that? There was a court case in San Diego about let them play. They went through all the let them play stuff, and then they had a court case that ruled that San Diego could play, and then the CIF went, okay, well, we're next. Let's not wait for it. And they started to talk about having the season. But, again, a reasonable person in charge, who has to make those decisions, I told somebody at one point, I don't know if I could be the guy making those decisions because I would err on the side of safety at all costs.
Right.
So
Because I couldn't stand being the guy who said, "Oh yeah, let's do it. We're fine. There's no cases that we can find of all the teams and all the other states that played," and that was kind of the rhetoric for a while. And then I say yes, and somebody that I know dies. That just, to me, there was no question about where the line was drawn.
right.
But
So
everybody,
what do you do in that situation, Coach Willig? You pass the responsibility and say, well, it wasn't our call. We were just following county health guidelines, or we were following certain guidelines. Therefore, it's not on us. And that's basically what CIF has done. And I think Rob overall does a good job in a bad situation, and Tom Simmons as well. But I do think, certain areas have gotten away from them, and it's an obvious joke, the have and have not situation going on here, in several sports, but we're talking specifically football. It's an obvious joke. You don't get to Mater Dei's level, or St. John Bosco's level every year unless things aren't being done on the up and up. You just don't. High school football is cyclical. It's a good class comes in, you win. Right. A bad class comes in, you suck. That's the point of it. There's variance and stuff like that, and that's also the beauty of it. That's what makes that beautiful class that comes along at Arroyo High School and finally wins the CIF championship so special. Or at El Monte High School, they win a CIF championship. Now, granted, they had a player fall out of the sky for them in order to do it, the kind that would never really be seen at El Monte. But still, after years and years of 2-8s and 3-7s, they win CIF, and it's like legendary. It's bigger news when Mater Dei or Bosco don't win CIF, and that's what I'm saying. That this whole haves and have-nots thing, it's an obvious problem because it does have a ripple effect. If one or two or three tower over everybody, then there's 5 or 6 or 10 in the area somewhere that have nothing. And that's what you've seen happen. And that's why we've had to go to 14 divisions now, 13, right. What it used to be 10, then 11, then 12, then 13, 14, because we got a huge cap. We got a ton of, 1-9s and 2-8s, because other people, got so much better, and took away the talent. And it's I like neighborhood high school football. That's my thing. And fortunately that does still exist. I can go locally here in the San Gabriel Valley. I can go to Alhambra, or, I don't know, you name it. I can go to a few places, San Marino, something like that. And I could see guys that, just, they're 5'5" and 145 pounds, but God blessed them with speed, and they're able to get away and have a great high school career. Right. And I would take that any day than going to watch, Mater Dei and Bosco. It's a product I just can't support.
It's funny growing up at St. Paul in the late 70s and early 80s. It was people used to go, oh God, a bunch of small little Mexicans running around out there freaking knocking the shit out of people. And I look back and I'm like, we had like 20 guys from San Pedro,
exactly.
We weren't little by any means, we had some freaking, guys that I thought, that guy's like 25 years old when I was a freshman,
right.
They look, but I, coaching in some of the places that I've coached, that is the beauty of it, coaching at a St. Bernard's where, all those kids are coming from downtown LA and their parents are getting them out of the muck and the mire that's going on in the streets. And those kids, I've got two of those kids are now, doctors and pediatric surgeons, and, the people that took their educations really seriously and could play ball.
High character.
Yeah, and it was such an amazing thing to see that it again, it's people laughed at me when I stayed at Pioneer for so long, but it was that thing, I played at a high level. I coached at a high level. I got to play in college. I had all those things. It just never seemed to be about my ego anymore, which I hope I got more joy out of it because of it. And to see
Yes.
those kids that got good coaching, that got to wear a shirt and tie to school, and got to have a meal before the games, and got to have a Saturday morning where parents showed up. I mean, those kind of things will last forever for those kids. And I'm not sure if that happens, whether it becomes blasé by some programs because that's all they get, and Pat Harlow is a friend of our family and my brother, and they played together, and he's constantly shaking his head. He's having a hard time with the 7-on-7 guys and those things going on, and I know his character, and he's fighting every day to try and figure out how to compete and still maintain the integrity of the whole thing. It's and it's got to be like that for a lot of those schools.
Aram, is there a way out? Is there a way back? Is there a place where we can redeem ourselves as a society with football, or is it gone?
God, that's a great question. It's
I mean,
so
do we just
hard.
let them to the dogs? Just let them be club guys? I mean, I also coach softball, and that's been a club sport for 25, 30 years now. High school coaches don't get any love, So what is there a way? I mean, I know you're the one to ask because you're kicking it around every single day. You can't get away from it. What's the 3-step plan here, Aram? Because we need some light shining on this thing.
Well, we're going to need to go back to the basics, and it's kind of what Coach Willig was just talking about. And I was thinking the word that kept coming to mind while he was speaking was development. And that's what high school football should or used to be about: development of character, of ability, yes, of everything, development of a young man. If it goes back to that, then yes. If it's all about winning and clout and all that stuff, then no. But that starts not with the coaches, but it starts at home with the parents.
Right.
So in order for me to say, yeah, there's a way out, I would have to believe that parents are going to change from being delusional, clout chasing, in a lot of cases, monsters. That if they don't like what one coach at one place says, they leave and they go to another. And if little Jimmy isn't, starting by his sophomore year, the club coach gets in his ear and steers him to another school where his boy is coaching. It has to start grassroots. It's not going to happen. If you're waiting for CIF to come lay an iron fist down, it's not going to happen.
Okay.
It's not in their interest really business wise. And it's not practical. I've been in those meetings when any kind of that kind of stuff, radical change comes, it might get passed for a year or two, and then people move to have it changed back.
Right.
You remember that? I mean, they've done that, recently, like with competitive equity and stuff like that.
I'm afraid that these children, these athletes are seeing adults act in a certain way, so they're not going to have the equipment, the tools to have those character conversations, those tough conversations, even with their own kids. I mean, have we ruined this generation with this behavior by these parents? Are these parents monsters creating monsters? Or how do we arrest that? Because there's no way to go back. And the only way I can see is that legislation. No more open enrollment. You got to go to the school that's, less than a mile from your house, separate, my roommate in college was a Chicago guy. They have a whole separate Catholic league. They don't even mess around. They do not mix. It's segregated, for the lack of a better word. I mean, I don't see how some kid's going to have this experience that they're having right now, and potentially an amazing learning experience and an amazing character building experience. The sort of thing that makes a person tough. Clearly the parents aren't tough. They're cracking and breaking and doing whatever, lying, stealing, and cheating. There has to be some kind of legislation to put these people back in line. And I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at. You would know better than me. I'm not in the mix, but
I just, like I said,
won't do it.
It has to start, at home. And if I have no confidence that that's going to happen. And, it's sad. It's a sad commentary, but I mean, this is, you can't fight the tide. I mean, it's going to come in regardless.
Football was the tool to make the character. That was the tool.
It was, right. and this didn't just start this decade or last decade. It's been building. It's been building for a while, and
the transfer rules have been softening and softening and softening for years. Yeah.
It became such a business, and what's sad is, like I said earlier, what was so wrong with the game in the 90s and the 80s and the 70s? It wasn't broken. The best guys got their scholarships and stuff like that. There's always going to be people that fall through the cracks. What was so wrong with that? That we had to get, sold these dreams and lied to and join a rat race in order to get the experience we think we should have. I don't understand that for the life of me. I don't.
Yeah, it's I think there's, it's funny. Tom and I often talk about a lot of different subjects that we talk about the 80-10-10 rule, where 10% of the far right and 10% of the far left make all the noise, and that's what we hear about, and the 80% in the middle kind of get lost. And there's still, to me, there's hope that the 80% in the middle, still are really the ones that have that character still. We talk about it in politics, because I think there are still people that will have conversations and won't freak out and then are completely opposite of what my opinions are, but they're afraid to do that because they don't know whether I'm one of those people on the far right or the far left. And I'm hoping that there's enough people in the middle that are still getting that great experience out of their high school days, and that there's something, to be said. I've got to believe that there is, because it was the fight that I fought. I fought the recruiting deal, and I coached kids that live in Pioneers District, and I got some transfer kids that came, organically, that just showed up, and and that was cool. When nobody that ever made an overwhelming difference, but again, it was unbelievably cool to see those kids get the experience that they can take with them and be proud of. And that, to me, I think there are a lot of kids who that's still true for, but it's changing a lot since, those kids are having to be those 1 and 9s and 2 and 8s instead of the 5 and 5s that they used to be. Even the worst, teams didn't hover down in that 1 and 9 because they moved them in the league and got them in a better situation. But that's not happening the same way anymore either. And, the disparity is a lot like the 1% of the people who rule the country, and it's a tough situation. But
is there a place for high school just to wash their hands of all this sports stuff and just say, go play Little League, go play club, do whatever you're going to do. We're a learning institution.
I mean, there was talk of that, just recently, that club could just, replace everything. I don't think so, because, like, these club games have absolutely zero historical context or context at all. You couldn't tell me who the winner's circle team beat in their second game of the club season.
Right.
You couldn't tell me what the team chosen one, Elite from Pasadena, who they even played in game 3 of their season out in Arizona. So there's no context. And the game would really, really suck if they did that. Now, there are people in education who believe, Tommy, like what you're talking about is eventually going to come, because they believe that admin types don't like sports at all. It's just an afterthought. It's a pain in their ass. And what they really care about is attendance and grades and test scores, and not sports. So there are people that think that, and that would be a way for, club to jump in. But,
I hope everybody's hearing that, Aram, because I believe that there's a possibility that it's gonna go away in some places.
There's a lot of club guys that believe that too. There's a lot of high school guys that believe that too. And then you start to ask the question: is club ball here to stay? They're already, as long as there's disenfranchised people who feel like they didn't get the best crack that they should have at high school, are being sold a second chance or another opportunity, then you're going to have, you're going to have customers if you're the club thing.
I love that.
But man, I mean, gosh, I don't know how you play both in 1 year. I mean,
That's a beating.
what, a couple of 10-game seasons in the same year? What's going to happen in order for high schools to protect this is really high school coaches are going to have to once and for all, and some tried this with 7-on-7 when it first started coming out, put their foots down and say, you are either with us and no club ball, you are with us the entire offseason. What we do, you're not going to play for a club team and then come back and join us. It's going to take all of them doing it together. It can't just be, 3 guys in a league of 6 doing it, because then the kids at the other 3 schools are going to move around and they're going to go. If that's the rule across the board, if that's the plan, if everyone's doing it, then it works. But, again, how do you get everyone on the same page?
Especially if the Mater Days and the Boscos and those kind of schools they're just going to hire one of those guys onto their staff. So they have a direct plug into it, and that they're going to get what they need out of it. And it's just another way of keeping the pipeline open, and
Chuck, I'm just going to show the high school coach with the $5,000 stipend how much that guy makes. And it's like that guy's making 20 grand, you're making 5.
Yeah, there's no doubt. It was really funny. I don't know if you're familiar with Jason Boyce, who's a quarterback coach guy, and they've been doing stuff. They were in the National Football Association quarterback camp, and it's a full immersion camp. So they come out. They did the last 3 of them at our school, and we worked with them a lot because the character of how they did it was amazing. But they brought the kids in, and they spent almost as much time in classrooms and gymnasium as they did on the field, talking about the character of the game and the relationship with the game and your parents and the relationship to your schoolwork and your school. And, they played a lot of the stuff from, like Urban Meyer talked about, we'll never talk to a 7-on-7 coach. And he gave that speech, and they really, really, it almost brings a tear to my eye to think about those guys and the way they did that thing, because it was so altruistic and it was so real, and they were definitely not preaching that same deal, and they made ways for all kinds of kids to go for half prices and cheap stuff, but they coached the heck out of those kids. And there's a few of those people out there, I'm sure, that are doing that kind of job, and I hope that we're talking about a little smaller percent that makes a big splash than really the whole overall picture. It would
behoove Urban Meyer, Chuck, and it would behoove all those big cats to put their stamp on it right now and pick high school. If those guys said, yeah, you can do all that nonsense, we're not showing up, I'm not looking at any huddle film from that, I'm only looking at your high school buddy, so just forget all that. We have this system built. We don't need any of this nonsense on the side. It doesn't. What coach is going to go to Bullhead and sit there and watch? That might be a way, Aram, to take this down, is to bring it from that level, because they're listening.
The speech that Coach Bullock just brought up, I remember when that happened, and I remember posting it. I remember getting a bunch of messages from club coaches, were actually 7-on coaches at the time.
Yeah.
Urban Meyer was saying, I'll never take the 7-on-7 guys, word for it, and don't talk to them, don't care. All of them saying that's total bullshit. I got text messages to prove it. And all coaches talk to us and all that stuff. And you will see these guys often post, screenshots of text messages with college coaches, because it's good for business with them. Look at me. I Coach O's, direct line. And I said, this past summer, those college coaches are just using you 7-on and club coaches as a way to have constant contact with the athletes that they want. They don't want them because of what you said or did or anything like that. They're only talking to you because they want them, because they've seen their high school film.
Oh, that's a great point.
Their high school coach, but they know that the club coach is the guy that has probably more contact with them in the off season or at other things. And it's just another way to stay on it. So I think what would happen is, if all these college coaches agreed to do that, behind the scenes, they would still be contacting these club coaches to try and get an edge, because there's so much money involved.
Right.
You need to get any edge you can. And this actually brings up a big thing, that the college recruiting process has now become such a scam in itself, that it has, bred this, I guess, industry, this cottage industry in high school, that you need to do more than just play high school. You need to be in a club team. You need to have a specialty coach that, will contact these guys. You need to have a 7-on-7 film and stuff like that. And it's really too bad, because at the end of the day, they're really only going off of, the high school stuff.